Welcome to Is Your Way in Your Way podcast, where your host, Cassandra Crawley Mayo, helps you break free from obstacles and live life on your terms. Get ready to embark on a journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and inspiration. Tune in as we dive into captivating conversations with experts and explore topics that will ignite your passion and drive. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Let's dive in.
Good day out there to all of my listeners, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Is Your Way in Your Way, and it's brought to you by my signature program. My signature program is called The Rise Journey, which will enable you to start designing your best life on your terms. And it's also created just to help women move from silently stuck to spiritually ignited and living in divine alignment. So if you're ready to rise beyond limits, not only is this podcast for you, but also my 6-month program titled Rise Beyond Limits. And today I am joined by someone who knows that truth firsthand, Aneta Kuzma. After 25 years in corporate leadership, Aneta left the grind to embrace a different kind of power, one rooted in peace, presence, and purpose. And I wanted to bring this episode to many of you because a lot of listeners are purpose-driven women, and there's something calling you that you know within your heart or in your groanings that is something else that you should be doing, but you just can't seem to move the lever. And I just want to kind of us to talk, and I want you to listen to what Aneta has said, because you know what? This is my second time interviewing her. She's the first of all of the guests I've had over 150 guests to interview twice, because I believe that she has some insight for you that's going to help you pivot and start living that life that you were designed to live. So let's get ready for our conversation that will shift how you see success and yourself. And let me introduce you. Some may remember. Well, hello, Aneta. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing so great, Cassandra. Thank you so much for having me back. I just love our conversations, and I think that your mission and mine are so aligned. So It just always feels wonderful being with you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you back. Guys, I want to talk about the title, the headline for this podcast, and it's titled Lanterns of Light and Come Home to Yourself. And Aneta and I talked about this a little bit prior to coming on, and I really like coming home to yourself because when I was in therapy, I've always been in therapy for years, and one day, one of my therapists said to me, "You need to just come home to self." And I was like, "What is she talking about? What do you mean come home to myself?" So Aneta's going to explain that to us, but I just want to read a little bit of her bio for those who've did not hear the prior podcast that we've had before. But she is a transformational coach. She does breath work, meditation guide, and she's a founder of her own coaching and consulting business. Now, she worked 25 years in corporate, and she actually followed a divine call to help others live more intentionally. And I really want to preface that because I believe many of you have a divine calling. You're in this workspace that you're okay with, you're grateful that you have it, but you know that there's something else inside. So today she blends her wisdom, her leadership tools, and she guides high achieving women to slow down, reconnect with your inner truth, and create lives that feel as good on the inside as you look on the outside. And guess what? She has a new book. Aneta and I talked June of 2024. And here it is, another year. And this, I'm telling you, I know this is a journey from that day to here for her to write another book, the Lanterns of Light. Oh my goodness. And so she actually embarked on another, what I'm gonna call a self-discovery journey. We talked about back a year ago, we talked about alignment resulting is a greater sense of balance. Back then, and we're going to talk about alignment now as well. So, Aneta, now because we spoke over a year ago, I am very interested. Well, actually, guys, she's done retreats. Um, this is not her first book. And she's also done yoga and all of that. But I want to know about her journey behind Lanterns of Life. And what did you learn about from a year ago to today? And guys, her book was just published last Tuesday. That is amazing. So all of this is new. And because I'm an author, I can imagine how she feels inside. So tell us about that journey from last year to this last Tuesday about this book.
Oh my gosh. Well, so I'm going to take you back even a little further because I think we talked about my first book when I was on last year, Live the Width of Your Life. And I was writing the second book. So I heard it was a divine invitation to write the second book. I was sitting in meditation, November of 2023. And I heard God say, it's time to write your second book. And I wasn't sure what it was going to be about. And the more I sat with it, the more I prayed. And what I heard very clearly, and I know it wasn't for me because I didn't want to do it, it was to write a book about my favorite scripture verses and how they've helped me during some of the hardest times of life and during experiencing all the things we experience as humans. And I also heard God say, and I want you to include your journal entries when you used these verses to help you. And, I type my journals typically almost every morning. And so instead of writing, I just find it much easier for myself. So I went back and I searched, and there were over 20 scripture verses that I could find over the last however many years. And I thought, oh, wow, I do this really often. This is interesting. So I started with those, and I allowed myself to kind of meditate on the verses and look at what was happening in my life during that time. And slowly it really started to unfold. And what I saw was that with these verses, I thought, how do I organize this in the way that makes sense? And it really became this arc of our spiritual journey, which is never linear. But the book ended up being 7 sections and 35 chapters. And it starts with, section 1 is really around the foundation of faith. And then to the end where we talk about, how do you live this and carry this forward? How do you allow yourself to come back home, as you said earlier on? And so I spent almost 2 years writing this book, and I had fits and starts. I'll tell you, Cassandra, I was really resisting it. I had so much fear and I had so much doubt because I kept thinking, who am I to do this? I'm not qualified. I'm going to be judged. I am scared. I don't talk about my faith in this way publicly, although it's very strong. And yet God just kept saying, finish the book, finish the book, finish the book. And that's what I kept hearing. And so I did, and here we are.
Well, let's talk about God.
Yeah,
because a lot of listeners, it's like something is telling them something. It's kind of like your conscious or your gut feeling. And as women, they said, go with your gut if you're feeling something. But you're not saying it was your gut. You're saying it was God. How do you know that it was God telling you that?
Yeah, well, because it definitely was not something I wanted to do. It was a very deep inner knowing. And I've had that sort of in other stages of my life where it's just so clear. And it was definitely, I tried to go against it. I tried not to do it. And that morning, actually, I sat at my computer after I had kind of message, and I wrote the intro in a couple of minutes. The whole thing just came out.
Wow. Okay.
So it was complete co-partnership. And I do believe that inner knowing and that gut instinct, I think that is the spirit telling us one way or another often. And when we are quiet, when we are still, then we are able to hear that voice. And of course, there's discernment and there's practice with that. And I kept going, are you sure you want me to write this book? Are you sure? And it would not go away. So God definitely pursued me in writing this book.
Yeah, that sounds so familiar. In that process, what was your support system like?
I told my husband right away, and I told my kids, and they're so supportive. And all my friends and my clients, it's really interesting. A lot of my close friends and clients, they always used to call me preacher. They would joke around because I always had, someone would say something and I'd go, oh, that's the story of this, or this reminds me of this. And I just carried some of these sort of examples or stories where people are like, wow, you explain that so clearly and so easily. I've never read that, or I never heard that before, but that totally resonates or makes sense. And so I think that it was always within. And I have one friend in particular, Cammie. She and I used to run together. We'd run marathons and half marathons. Yeah. So we'd run for hours together, and we'd always talk about faith and we'd talk about God. And she said, you have to write a book about this one day. She said that like years and years ago. And so her particular review is on the back of the book. She wrote, I have a notebook full of scribbles of profound thoughts shared by my friend over the course of many years. She's now gracefully composed a collection of these observations for all of us to read. And so it, goes on. But she was one of the first people that said, oh, you're going to have to write a book about this.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring that up because, there's so many of us that have dreams and aspirations, but yet our circle is distracting. Individuals are not in our best interest. And I know many of them are aware that who to tell and who not to tell. And you cannot do anything alone. So it's great to have people in your corner to encourage you. And I say that because when I was writing my book, there were certain people I didn't tell, even thoughts. It was sacred. I did not want to share because I did not want to hear that feedback because I knew it would be negative. So that's why I wanted to bring that up, because I'm certain you had a support system.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that, because it is true. There are definitely, whether I was thinking about it that way, there were definitely people I told, and there are people I didn't until almost the end, where it's like, oh, guess what? A book is coming out. I just want you to know before you see it. Because I think that sometimes people project their fears, and just because it's our assignment doesn't mean that someone else understands it.
Right.
And it's for them to validate or understand. And especially if, writing a book is such a sacred assignment. It is something that, as you know, like you feel all the feelings. You asked me before we got on, like last week, I was feeling all the feelings. I was crying. I was happy. I was joyful. I felt relief. I felt humbled, everything. You feel all those things. And you still feel like, for me, I still feel unworthy. I still texted my editor and I'm like, George, please tell me that this doesn't suck, right? Like the book isn't bad.
Right. Exactly.
There's still this, fear, that it's never ready. And I guess a book is probably never ready.
Right. Now, Aneta, you're right about those different emotions, because you have just, it's hard to explain the feelings when you do something that when it's done, you kind of know, that's just what I should have done. I should have written the book. So my question to you, now you've written one before, but after this, do you sense an evolution within yourself? Have you evolved even more? And if so, what way have you done that?
Yeah, I think, coming back to this, come home to yourself, I feel like I am really just shedding more layers of self-doubt, more layers of limitations, coming back to my essence of who I am in a way, and feeling more confident in that, even when there's worries or doubts and all that. Right. Even my friends that have read it, they said, you can see a maturity and a difference just in the writing. I feel like this book was so much a heart-centered project, like so spirit-driven, that it feels different. It doesn't feel like an intellectual book. It feels like something that has energy and frequency. And I think that's just because I was in a different space when I was writing it. And I definitely felt like a co-creation.
Yeah. Let's talk about coming home to yourself. What does that mean? And why is it good to do that?
Ready to design your dream life? Join Cassandra Crawley Mayo's Create and Design Your Best Life workshop. Break free from self-doubt and obstacles and step into a life of purpose and fulfillment. Click the link in the description to register now. Don't wait. Spaces are limited. Start living your best life today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think everyone probably has a version of what that looks like. And for me, coming home, I think it comes back to like, who are you? And for me, I remember that I'm this eternal spiritual being who chose to come down here to have this experience in this earthly body, to remember to be the hands and feet of God, to do good work in this world, to bear the responsibility of what that means in terms of how we love one another, how we display that love to others, how we take care of each other. And I think we can only do that when we have a greater sense of who we are and our purpose. Also love ourselves. There's a chapter on the greatest commandment where Jesus says, love your Lord, your God, love your neighbor as yourself. Right. And in that chapter, I talk about so many people don't have love for themselves. So of course they project judgment and fear and hate onto others because they don't have it for themselves. They don't see the connection. They don't see the other person as another part of God. Right. And so that's one of those chapters that was, so emotional to write because it seems like God's calling. It seems like it's an easy commandment, right? Where you're like, oh, just do this, and then everything else falls into place. And yet it is so difficult to live that way and to exhibit that sort of love every single day. So I think it's coming back to who we are, why we're here, how we're created to be, leaning on our faith and our trust in the divine, and then seeing that in every other person too.
Yeah. Now, when I listen to you, I recall times when I didn't love myself. And I wondered, and I remember asking a girlfriend of mine, I'm like, do you love yourself? And she looked at me like, what are you talking about? Because I was in a self-discovery mode, and I've been in that mode for years, just trying to be who I was created to be with all these limiting beliefs that I had based on life, based on the lens that I wore. And I say that because I want you to share, how does one do that? Like I remember when she told me to come home to self. So what did you do to come home to yourself?
Yeah, I went back to God. I turned back to the Creator. And there's a chapter in the book that actually talks about this that I thought was really helpful. And it talked about how when God created the entire world, he created us, and he said it was very good. And that above all the creation, everything that he made, we are the only ones made in his image, and we are very good. And so chapter 24 really talks about, do we see ourselves as a masterpiece of the master? Do we see ourselves in that way? And if we don't, then how can we look back to who created us and trust if we were created this way, that we can also see ourselves that way. And just like when we look at the sun and the stars and the moon and the animals and all the other beautiful things in this world, and yet we're above all of that creation. And I think meditating on that, one is like, wow, can I allow myself to really feel that way? And if that's the nature of my spirit, the part that never dies, then what are the parts that I don't like? And how many of those are just conditioning, limited doubts that aren't true? How many are things that I could actually just examine and say, is this really true? And if it is, what can I do about it? And, but it always comes back to like, when I struggle with some of those things, is finding proof through scripture of really what the truth is.
Yes, exactly. And that reminds me of a time when I was going through depression. And I asked God, and I said, have you ever been depressed? Because I've read the word, and I'm like, have you ever been depressed? Is that okay to be like that? And I remember the next morning I was reading my devotions, and I knew this was God because I turned directly to the place where he told his disciples to wait for him. And he went to ask his father, can you take this cup away from me? And I was like, wow. And he said it 3 times. Like, he was like, I was so distressed and depressed. And when I read that, I'm like, okay, I'm okay. I know I was created into your likeness, but this is a demonstration that you went through the same thing that I went through. So you are so right. And when we talk about God, and I tell my listeners, whomever, if you have to believe in something, if you don't believe in something, you believe anything. Okay. And so I don't think we are trying to sway them. We're just telling them what it was like for us, because that's what worked for me and for you.
Yeah. And it's just my lineage. Like I've examined and studied all faiths and just learned so much because I'm so curious about the human existence. And so we'll always continue to be on our journey. And I don't think that, the divine God, whatever word you want to use, wants us to not doubt, because there's so many instances in scripture where Jacob literally wrestled with God, right? Like was like, I'm getting this blessing from you. Like, I'm not letting go. And so I don't think that is unheard of. It's not surprising. And it doesn't mean that we're less than. I think it just means that we're going through this human experience, which, as you mentioned, Jesus also went through. And in the end, the answer was like, okay, your will, not mine. We can't control all the things. We cannot.
That's right. That's right. Okay, tell us the title of your book, because this is not the title on the screen. What is the title of your book?
So the title is Lanterns of Light, Illuminating Your Way Home. And what I meant by that is that I believe that scripture are lanterns for us. They light our path, just like in your instance where you needed to find something about depression. You were shown a passage and it gave you what you needed in that moment. So the scripture becomes the lantern so that we can take the next step forward in faith. But then also we become lanterns of light in the world when we start to embody our faith in the greatest ways, because then we can do that for other humans, because that's what we're here to do. And so that's why I love the play of the word light and also illumination. I just think that that's, and of course God is the light of the world. So there's just a lot of different symbolism there with the title.
Right. Okay. Do you have a favorite scripture? And if so, why?
I don't think I have a favorite. However, I do have one that I had etched in wood in my front office. So I have struggled with fear, and fear most of my life, all kinds of fears. If you search in my journal entry, you'll see the word fear and afraid all the time. And I came across this artist, and she uses this interesting pen and etches in reclaimed wood. And so I had her etch, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and sound mind, from Second Peter. And I recite that to myself because the most common phrase in the Bible is do not be afraid.
That's right.
So for me, it's not a favorite necessarily. I have so many favorites, but it is, it's an affirmation. It is something I repeat, something I say to myself all the time, because anytime the fear and the doubt creeps in, which is the human existence, I say, for God has not given us the spirit of fear. It is not from God. And I'm like, if it's not from God, it's not true. Right. It's not real. It's false evidence appearing real. So that's the one I think I go back to over and over again. But of course, there's so many beautiful verses. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
How about you? Do you have a favorite?
Well, I don't, but and I like what you said, depending on what I am going through.
Yeah.
I will find it, I will write it on a 3M note card and stick it on my mirror in my bathroom. When I had that self-doubt and low self-esteem, and how God said, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And I would look at that in the mornings and I'm like, okay. And it would resonate within my spirit. It's just like God didn't give you a spirit of fear, but power, love, and sound mind. I'm like, okay. Yeah. And another one was John 10:10, when he says, that's one of my favorites, and I can't even think of it. It's the one about God, the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Yes. And God came to give you life. And I hung on to that because I'm like, God, if you came to give me life, I'm not living life. So what's the deal? Yeah. And I even wrote a chapter in my book about, for those who doubted whether there was a God. And there were times that I'm like, I don't think you're real, because I shouldn't be going through all of this. Just a real heart-to-heart talk. And if you test him, and you don't supposed to, but you do, he will show up if you're open. And he showed up in my life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you are real, So I like what you said about depending on what you're going through. Yeah.
And we're not promised that life won't be without, troubles. But God also said, I have overcome the world. He's overcome all those. Yeah. And so I hold on to that too. That's one of the chapters in the book.
Yeah. Now, you talked about your sections in the book. Is there, and it's interesting because you have 7 sections.
Yes.
And listeners, I told Aneta in the beginning, 7 is my number. And then we even talked about when her book was published, it was the day when the moon was full.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the brightest thing, and they always say when the moon's full, lots of stuff happens. And it was a wise tale from my granddad that used to tell my mom when the moon was growing to a full, he said, clip that girl's ends of her hair. And I was like, what? She said, because it'll grow faster. So she would clip at the full as the moon was growing, and even planting crops and flowers. And it's amazing, what he said about when the moon is full. So I just know great things are going to happen. So out of those 7 sections, is there one particular one that you struggle with?
Reading back the chapters, and I'm going to name the sections quickly.
Okay. Sure.
Section 1 is faith foundations. Section 2 is divine surrender. Section 3 is purpose and calling. Section 4 is divine provision. Section 5 is transformation and growth. Section 6 is living in love. And section 7 is divine resilience.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I feel like as I was reading through, I could see, because I have my journal entries and they're all different dates. I was like, wow, it's so nonlinear. Like I would see myself being in such a great place, feeling so good. And then, oh my gosh, how am I still reliving the same experience? How am I still have scarcity mindset? Why am I still worried about money? How am I so like all of these things where I was like, wow, how is this still a lesson that I'm going through? And so there's a couple that I know I struggle with is scarcity at times, is like always worrying, like, can I give everything over to God, including finances and money?
Exactly.
Even though I've always been taken care of, it's a crazy thing. It could be generational. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think, releasing control. So there's this natural inkling for me to hold on to certain things and to think that I need to do it myself before I get the point of desperation when I finally surrender. And then God's like, okay, I've been waiting for you. Here you go. And then I have a chapter, about Mary and Martha and the story of the two sisters where, Martha is just worked herself up. She is so upset because she is just trying to serve the Lord and cook and clean. And she's like, tell Mary to come help me. Right. Like and Jesus is like, no, I won't, because she's sitting at my feet and she's listening and I won't always be here. And she's chosen the right thing to do. And so there's a chapter where my journal entry says, I'm Marthaing my way through life again. And I think that's this, heavy masculine energy of achievement and go. It's in my nature. I think it's a learned condition from my family. And it's something that I continue to work on, reminding myself the rest is not lazy, that rest is needed, the pausing and reflection is important. And so those are some of my big lessons, but there are 35 chapters, so there are at least 35 lessons in here.
Yeah. And I'm glad you even talked about your doubts and you're still a work in process, because a lot of us, we compare. So we listen to you today, my listeners, and like, wow, she really has it together, and you can remember probably being in corporate where I used to have people say, oh, I wish I was you. I wish I could, wish I could do like you. And I was like, sweetheart, if you only knew what I went through to get to where I am today, no, you would not want to be me. And so say something about that, how we compare ourselves to people. It keeps us stuck.
Oh my gosh, Cassandra, there's a chapter, of course. This is like every time I talk to people, I'm like, I've got a chapter for this. So I don't have it all together because every day is different. And it's just the fact that I just know I don't have to do it alone. That's the whole point. So before Jesus died and he knew he was going to be crucified, he was walking with Peter, and he was telling all of the disciples, like, here's your assignment. I'm leaving. Here's your assignment. And he was talking to Peter and he's telling him, you're going to be the rock that the church is built on, right? Like all of the stuff that we know about Peter. Yeah. And then Peter sees John and he says, okay, Lord, but what about him? And Jesus says to Peter, don't worry about him. If I want him to stay with me until the end of time, like, why does it matter to you? And it's just an example of the fact that even Peter, who I love so much, who represents so many of us.
Yes.
Even he, when, the Lord is saying, this is your assignment. This is what I want you to do this for the rest of your life. He wants to know, well, but what about John? What are you going to have John do? And it's like, that's our story, the human condition. We don't say, this is mine. I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to honor my mission. We're always curious. What are they doing? What did you tell them to do? How are they doing? What are they blessed with? How many followers? What are, how much money are they making? Whatever the thing is. And it's like, that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to focus on our assignment because we all are here for a different reason. So 8 billion people, there's no way I could take care of all of them. No way you can. So there is no competition. We each just do the best that we can with what we've been given, and we'll be okay.
That's correct. And I always say, if we're living, he's not done.
Right.
So we still have work to do, and I think, I know the Bible, I always say basic instructions before leaving earth is my acronym for the Bible. And it is a fascinating book. And there is an actor, Denzel Washington. One day I heard him say, people are like, what book was the last book you read? And what's a good book? And he says, I never read books. All I read is the Bible. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's very interesting. And that's what works for him. But if you read and if you just surrender, it's amazing what the word will get you to. It's just amazing how it gets inside and you be like, wow, it's like they know just what I'm going through. How in the world can they know that? This is the story I needed to hear. I needed to hear that Joseph's Pharaoh's wife was trying to get with Pharaoh. It wasn't Pharaoh,
Yeah.
Joseph. Yeah. He
Yeah.
says, oh, so okay, so it was really her, it wasn't me. So just the things that are happening and how he killed one of the Egyptians. So everything that's going on today has happened in the Bible.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's alive. Like when I am connected and in alignment, and when the world is quieter and I allow myself to just read, there is so much inspiration because it's alive. The word is alive. And I think for me, I've spent so much time and I read a lot of self-help books and I've studied, I said, yoga and meditation and all these things. And yet I just find that the greatest wisdom comes from scripture, and there are stories, and it never fails that I'm always given the scripture that I need at the right time. And even in writing this book, the last chapter, it came to me in a dream. God said, call it Coming Home. And I want it to be the story of the prodigal son. And
so good.
It's, and then the other one came in a dream. It was a story about the woman who was bleeding for 12 years and her faith, told her, if I just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. Yes. I will be healed. And so it's that, that faith that activates, the spirit. Yeah. And so it's just amazing. And I think that with this book, it is not dogmatic. It is not telling anyone what to believe, but I hope that what it does is it creates more conversation. And it gives people permission that they could be in the word and they don't need anyone else to tell them what it means, that it is available for them, that there is something relevant, that it's not this really hard, dense thing that we can't interpret. And I hope that we have many more conversations because we learn by talking to one another.
That's true. That's true. And that's why you say scripture still matters today. In today's world. So I love how you put that. Yes.
And it's less exhausting. It's less exhausting to try to ask for help and to know that we're created to be in communion with our creator than it is to try to, manifest our way through our own means. I mean, it's just exhausting.
It is. It really is. Aneta, how can my listeners get your book and get in touch with you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would love it. It is available on Amazon. You can search for my name. You can search for Lanterns of Light. It's available on Kindle and then paperback. And if you want to get in touch with me, my website is probably the easiest way. So you just go to my name, Aneta, Aneta Kuzma, Kuzma.com. And you can find all the details about the book, about, scheduling time with me, about all the other things that I'm up to, or joining the newsletter if you'd like.
And something else I want to say is, and for my listeners as well, you may get unstuck and start doing what it is that your purpose is. You can do that. But what I will say, once you do that, there's going to be more. So don't think after you wrote that book or opened that business or got through with a relationship or whatever, don't think that you've arrived, that's it, because there will be more as long as you're living.
That's right. And how wonderful is that? That's so exciting. We don't know. And that's part of the path. That's part of the lantern doesn't light the whole path. It only lights what you need to know for today. And we always want to know the whole story, don't we? We want to know what the end of the movie is going to be and all those things. But my God, there's so much excitement on the journey itself if we just allow it to be.
It really is. It really
Mhm.
is. Aneta, thank you so much. I could just sit down and I'm not a coffee drinker, but I would sit down and have some tea with you and we could just talk and talk and talk because this is for me, it's very refreshing. And I know for a lot of my listeners, it's very refreshing.
Mm.
And I encourage my listeners to share this podcast with someone that they know that this will bless them, particularly when you come home to yourself and what a difference it will make in the lives of many. So I just want to thank you again. God bless you, Aneta, and to all of my listeners, God bless you. And I always say bye for now. And I'm on every Wednesday. I would encourage you to continue to listen to this podcast so you can also rise and be and start living your purpose and coming home to yourself. God bless you. Thank you, Aneta.
God bless, Cassandra. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you've been enjoying our empowering conversations, make sure you don't miss out on future episodes of Is Your Way in Your Way podcast. Stay in the loop with all the latest episodes. Join our mailing list over at CassandraCrawley.com. And before you go, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe now. Until next time, let's get ready to live your best life.